Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Why Relationships Matter in the Innovation Economy. My name is Casey, and this is a Goodie Nation podcast. So, for those of you who don't know, Goodie Nation is an organization that exists to bridge the relationship gap for so many deserving founders. These are founders in the social entrepreneurship space, founders who just may not readily have the resources available to them that they need to succeed in their businesses and their careers. And so one of the things that we love to talk about here at Goodie Nation is how relationships with family, with mentors, with colleagues, affect the career journeys of the amazing people who are in our ecosystem. And so today we have yet another very special guest. We have one of our Goodie Nation board members, Jenea Bradley, who we're super excited to talk to and learn about why relationships matter to her. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Of
Excited
course.
to be here.
Very cool. Very cool. So, classic Goodie Nation question. To start off with, I would love for you to share your origin story.
Oh gosh, you would think I'd be really good at this by now. It's be my third time doing this, but I will try. So origin story. Hello. My name is Jenea Bradley. Thanks you all for having me on. I guess my origin story. So I did not grow up in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, but I've always been really interested and really excited about the idea, right? Like the idea that someone can just have an idea and go after it. I grew up, my dad was in the school system. He grew up, he was a teacher when I was young, went on to be a principal. He was the pastor of my church. And so he was definitely the figurehead, the breadwinner of our family. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for most of my adolescence and actually went off to school when I was a teenager and went on to be an occupational therapist. So grew up definitely in more of the kind of corporate, knew I was going to go to college, knew I was going to do the whole corporate thing. And then, when I was in school, though, and I went to school for accounting, I knew I wanted to do something in business, and I was like, I'm good at numbers. I'm going to go that way. But I kept thinking, I was like, wouldn't it be so cool to have my own accounting firm? I thought that's what I would want to do at some point in my life, was own my own accounting firm, possibly do that. But I did not know one entrepreneur. And I didn't, know any entrepreneurs that had their own accounting firm. I didn't know any entrepreneurs to even help with accounting. And so that was always a very far off pipe dream that I was just considering. And I kept telling myself, if I could just meet someone and I could just look at their books, like maybe I could get an idea, or if I could meet another accountant that had their own accounting firm, I could potentially ask them some questions. But it just seemed very far off and out of reach because I wasn't a part of that community and I didn't know who I could even tap into. And so I went the, corporate route, went on to work at Deloitte, which I loved. And just loved kind of getting a chance to see some of the best businesses do it. And so, went that path. But then that seed kept bugging me, and I kept thinking, wouldn't it be so great to dip my toe into something like that? And so finally in 2018, after a few years at the firm, I started to think, I'm just going to get out there and see. And I kept seeing an individual who was an entrepreneur. His name is David Shands, and he has he had this brand at the time, and he was, coaching entrepreneurs. And I kept seeing him come up on my Instagram feed, and I was like, oh man, like I should meet him. And I saw he had a booth at the mall, and I was like, I'm just gonna go up and talk to him. And so I went to the mall and talked to him, and I said, hey, I would love to just pick your brain on this idea I have. And so he was like, hey, if you want to be my accountant for my nonprofit, and just to see how that is. And I was like, okay, that'd be cool. So I started working with him on a few things, entrepreneurial, just to get my feet wet. And I got the bug, and I was like, I love this. And he was actually the person that introduced me to Joey. And he said, hey, if you want to help out more entrepreneurs, especially in your seat at Deloitte, and get plugged into, other entrepreneurs that are doing things that need to be plugged into corporate, Joey would be the guy. And I was telling him, just as I was doing things at Deloitte, especially with tech-focused entrepreneurs, and helping them from a business side, he was saying, you should meet Joey. And so David made the intro to Joey, and so then I had it from both sides. I was helping David and getting to know Joey. And the more I dug into it, the more I started realizing just how dynamic the entrepreneurial scene is here in Atlanta. And I started seeing that I didn't necessarily even need to be a full-time entrepreneur, that I could, from my perch at Deloitte, be really helpful and really effective at bridging the gap and helping people who were helping entrepreneurs in my own way and make an impact in that way. And so the more I saw that, the more I started just volunteering with Goodie Nation and giving folks advice from an accounting perspective. So I would see, obviously the best companies, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, and how they operated, and be able to take that best practices to some of the new budding companies and entrepreneurs. And that gave me just an immense amount of pride. And so I started realizing that everyone doesn't need to jump the gun. Some folks can just operate in the spaces that they're in and make a great impact. And that's what I sought out to do. So, that's kind of my origin story and how I got here.
So, booth at the mall. You said, I love this. I love the kind of connect the dots. It went from seeing someone on Instagram, which I feel like, when we think about connections and networking, sometimes we don't think like, oh, this person on YouTube, this person on Instagram, this is the first step to maybe figuring out, what this path is. And so you went to the mall, ended up getting a job with this person, ended up being this is like the literal Cinderella relationship building story. And I'm very fascinated by what you said about discovering you didn't necessarily have to jump all in and say, I'm giving up my day job and I'm just going to do that, because there is a lot of sort of stigma, I would say, around folks who are doing their entrepreneurship pursuits full time versus those who are doing it while working a 9 to 5. And I'm curious if you have any other insights about, I don't know, perhaps how we can break that stigma in a way, or what, in the two worlds that you're living in, what are you learning between them? Do they kind of complement each other? Would love to hear that perspective.
Yeah, it was interesting because, being kind of most of my adult life, right, being in corporate, you always, kind of, you grow up with that mindset, right, of like, oh, you want to be safe and you want to be secure, and you're kind of looking at folks that jumped the gun or not jumped the gun, but jumped into the pool, right, of entrepreneurship, and you're like, oh gosh, like that seems scary, and you have that sense of admiration for them. But then there's also this stigma of, kind of the struggling entrepreneur, right? That went out there and did something crazy. And then you go on the other side, and I mean, and for me, it almost felt like living a double life, because I was very much, when I say I went over and worked with this individual, with David Shands, he was a full-time entrepreneur, and I actually worked with him, and we brought on another guy, another full-time entrepreneur. We went on to launch we had an event space, we had a coaching program, we were helping out other entrepreneurs. So we had a full kind of small business that we were running on the side, and I was fully immersed with other small business entrepreneurs that were, creatives and all that, and then would go to my day job and be fully corporate, and you would hear the conversations in both circles. And so the stigma, it was ripe on both sides, right? And you go to the entrepreneurship side, and they be talking about folks that, were locked into their 9 to 5, and there was almost this stigma of the corporate individual that was too scared to leave their day job, and didn't have the gall or the guts to do what they were doing. And what I realized was, if we really are trying to move the ball forward, right, and we all have the same goal of creating more opportunities, more spaces for individuals, and also not just to create businesses, but to create businesses that will scale and create opportunities for other individuals, not just be entrepreneurs and start more businesses, but have jobs with benefits, have jobs that are growing and can create opportunities and wealth for other people. We can't be competing against each other, and we can't be, looking down on one another. We have to all kind of come together and create that together. And in order for that to happen, we need folks to start businesses, and we need folks to come alongside them and help them to grow and develop. And so, I became, from being on both sides of it, I became even more emboldened to say, hey, like, everybody doesn't need to go out and start a business. Like we need folks to come alongside and say, hey, we need attorneys to come from some of the largest organizations and say, hey, I know how to do this well. Let me help you grow your business from a mom and pop to a multi-million-dollar organization. And so I just, from my seat, I just saw the huge gap in, especially when you talk about diverse-led businesses, our understanding of really what it takes to get from stage 1, 2 to 90, 100. So that's where I would really like to sit.
No, I love how this almost accidentally became a conversation about the relationship between corporate and the innovation economy, right? Like, I love this vision that you're presenting for an overall space where, yes, you need folks who are in corporate positions, you need folks who are starting businesses. There's no right or wrong answer, and how you're kind of like, I don't know, daywalker is probably the wrong term because you're not like a vampire, but like you're kind of like treading into both spaces and kind of
we need each
being,
other.
yes, that's really interesting. And speaking of just sort of being in multiple spaces, you mentioned that your involvement with Goodie Nation started with volunteering. And so you have a full-time job, you're working with entrepreneurs, small businesses. Where does volunteering fall within the range of all the other things that you do? And why do you believe, as a professional, that volunteering is an important thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. I mean, it's always important to give back, right? Like, we are all fortunate in our individual spaces, right, to have what we have. And for me, it was, okay, I wanted to figure out what the need was. And so that's not just going to come from conversations and where can I be helpful and where can I put my dollars, right? For me, I wanted to get my hands dirty, and I wanted to figure out, what do people need to get to the next level. And I realized very quickly that that was Joey's vision. His vision was not just to have a bunch of folks starting businesses, but to help the individuals who had already started businesses, who already had what it takes to get to the next level, figure out what they needed, and to help them get there. And so when I realized that, I was like, I am all in. Because like, that for me was what I realized I wanted to do, because I had seen, the very early stage. I have a dream, I really want to start something, help me do that. Or, I really am just starting, how do I go about, chasing that down? And there are a lot of folks that really want to start things, right? But, how do we corral around the folks who have already started? They have invested some of their own money, and they have gotten maybe that first few dollars to build an app or to start something. What do we do around those folks to make sure they get connected to the right people, they get the advice that they need, the resources they need, to really get to that next level? And so, yeah, for me, it was like, they don't have money to spend, on getting a consultant or an advisor or whatever, right? Like, we need people to lean in for free oftentimes, right? And figure out how we can be helpful. So I was definitely all in, like, and a lot of individuals that I met through Goodie Nation, I would literally tell them, like, here's my number, like, call me, like, I can look at your books. And in my mind, you know, I needed that too. Like, I needed to understand better what they needed, because that helped me to form, you know, my thought on how I can be most helpful to the next person. And so it was a win-win. And so, but yeah, I mean, in my mind, I feel like I always say, to whom much is given, much is required. And so, you know, I always feel like it's a part of what we owe, right? We owe it. We owe it to the world. We owe it to who we are, to give back. And so for me, it was a no-brainer.
Yes, and I can certainly say we are grateful to have you on our board. Accounting and numbers, those are important to have someone who understands them.
I'm very passionate about accounting and numbers. Don't get me started.
Well, no, that's great. I'm wondering, with, you know, all the spaces that you're in, again, how much do you even have to actively network, right? Like, are you still like searching for the meetup groups and the happy hours, or is this becoming something that's like, oh, I kind of know what spaces I need to go into to strengthen relationships? How does networking actually play a role in your realm of all the things that you do?
Oh gosh, all the time. Networking never stops. It really doesn't. And so, you know, I always say, like, you should never rest, right? Because there's always another person that you might, you know, you might need to know, you might need to have in your back pocket, and you never know if it's for now, if it's for later. And so for me, I had to remember to keep that top of mind as well, because I am a natural introvert. So if you let me, if I don't check myself, I'll sit and just kind of rest. But for me, you know, I definitely, it's an imperative. Relationships are the currency of the future, and I have a mentor, and he always tells me that and reminds me of that, because you'll need it, and you'll need it to be able to spend it later. And so I recently, at the firm, I just made a partner at Deloitte last fall. And so, you know, at every level, though, when you're trying to get to the next level, you need those relationships. And so for me, relationship building was an overdrive last year. Just, it felt like you're running for office, because you're trying to, you know, tell your story and tell who you are, and tell what you're going to bring, and all that. And so, you know, that was obviously important. But even now, even after kind of, you know, getting past that milestone, it's, you know, now it's, you know, well, who do I need at the next level, right? And for the next position, and for the next, you know, whatever it is. And then it's just good to always be building. And so for me, even now, I'm trying this new thing where I'm getting a collection of people, all within different spaces, whether it be lawyers, whether it be other advisors, you know, et cetera, you know, all kind of within the same space. And we're developing like a group where we can swap contacts, right, from a business perspective. And so, like, even doing that, it just takes being highly intentional about relationships, because people want to do business with people that they like, and that they have relationships with, and that they trust. And trust is so important, because when you're talking about giving someone a contract, a deal, your money, right? Like, you know, there's so many people, especially when you get to that rare air, and you start to get in a situation where everyone's great, right? And you look around, and the people vying for your dollars, your time, your resources, they're all amazing, right? And so you start, what makes the difference at that point is who you know, who you trust. And at that point, it's like, it's not the relationship that people are trying to build right then. It's like, well, who do I already know? And so it can't come off pushy. It has to come off as authentic as it can. And so that's only going to come if you're just in the right spot and you're building those relationships authentically, and it comes across as natural as it possibly can. Because if it comes across forced, it's never going to work. And so I just tell people, I'm like, and I get young people all the time in the firm, and they're like, well, how do I get a mentor? Or how do I, do X, Y, Z to build these relationships? And I'm like, you just have to be around and be intentional about being yourself, be intentional about, being nice and just trying to develop a relationship with people as authentically as you can, without needing anything. Because the moment you need something is not the moment to build the relationship. Like at that point, it's kind of too late. so you have to be intentional about building it either way. And then if you do need it, you already have it. So that's what I say.
I think like all the gems that have just been dropped just now. I hope that people will pick them up and run with them, because there were a lot. What did you say? Relationships are the currency for the future? Of the
Yeah.
future. Is that what it was?
I have
Relationships.
a mentor. He always says that, and as soon as he said it, I was like, it's so true, because it's not the currency of right now. You have it in your back pocket, you put it in your wallet, you put it in your purse, and you never know when you'll need it, when you need to spend it. But you have it. It's you never want to be that person that's like, oh, I need this. Like, can you can you do this for me? I just met you yesterday, and it's like, yeah, it's like, will you be successful? I don't know. It's at that point it's a toss up, right? Because people know desperation when they see it, right? When they hear it. That's why it's so hard to ask people for funds or for money, or even their time when you desperately need it, right? It's much easier to ask a friend that's already been involved. It's much easier to say, hey, like, come to this thing with me, and then there's an ask, versus, you're coming to somebody cold. And so, and that's one thing that I've loved about supporting Goodie Nation, is that, the things that I have been to, when I first started networking or I first started volunteering, there were just opportunities to come and volunteer, to come and experience what Goodie Nation was doing. And that was amazing, right? It was just, when I first reached out, it was like, hey, yeah, like, come and be a corporate representative, and evaluate, the readiness of some of our, some of our participants. And I'm like, absolutely. And I got a chance to meet with some individuals, up close and personal. I got to just meet some amazing founders. And I think that's where some nonprofit organizations go wrong, is they come right out with the ask for sponsorship. and I've actually gotten sponsorship dollars for Goodie Nation from my firm. But that was after I had already had an experience with Goodie Nation that I thought was amazing, and I'd already knew Joey, and like, people want to experience and already have a relationship before they kind of dive in, right? And so for me, I think that that's just so important. I think a lot of times people miss that and go right in with an ask, and I think that is just that's never a good way to go.
Wow. I mean, like, you're just speaking to the title of the program. Like, why do relationships matter in the innovation economy? It's like, yeah, I know I have to network and I know I have to go meet people, but I also need to, like, do my books and make sure everything is going right operationally. Like, oh, okay, networking. But you're really speaking to, like, the necessity for relationship building as that long-term, genuine way to protect and run your business. It's not, as you said, during the emergency, just reaching out and hoping that someone is like, oh, we'll help. Having those long-term connections could potentially be vital to the survival of one's entity. So,
because there will be an ask, right? Like, there always is an ask. You always need something. I'm networking now with companies. I'm on the Venture Atlanta Selection Committee, and I'm just reaching out to companies that I see come across, and I don't need anything right now. Sometimes they don't need anything right now, but it's like it's always great to have CPA in your back pocket, and you never know what you're going to need later on. And it's like, and I've had people reach out to me, months after I meet them, and they're like, hey, if you know of, I don't know, an investor, or of whomever, and it's like, you never know who I know, and I'm like, absolutely, like I have someone, that's looking to, that's an angel investor that's looking to invest, like absolutely, but you just never know, and you always you never start the first, like, intro meeting, or even the first two, with an ask. You just always just go in and just, hey, this is who I am, this is what I got going on, how are you, how's your kids, whatever, right? Because it's like people just want to do business with people that they like.
People just want to do business with people they like. So simple, so profound. So, Jenea, if someone is listening to this and they're like, yes, like the gems have been dropped, I would love to know more. What is the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Yeah, I can be reached on my LinkedIn. It's just my name, Jenea Bradley. So that's probably the best way to reach me.
Okay, fantastic. Well, everyone, I mean, listening, relationships are the currency of the future. And I mean, I loved in this conversation the notion that you might be in a pool of equally amazing people. Your credentials may all be the same, but it'll be the folks who've built those genuine relationships with the people who can take them to the next level, who are ultimately going to get to that next level. So don't wait to start building those networks and those relationships. Such an amazing episode. I'd like to thank Jenea for being our guest. And as our Goodie Nation founder, Joey Womack, always says, stay magnetic and outwork yesterday. Thanks for listening.